Jung was born in 1875 in Switzerland. Although raised in a religious environment, his father and uncles were Lutheran ministers. He studied science and medicine at Basel University and had eventually decided to specialize in psychiatry, pursuing a particular interest in schizophrenia. This is revealing given that Jung himself in childhood, often being withdrawn and aloof, developed a schizoid personality. Jung himself believed he had two different personalities, which he named number 1 and number 2. Stephen A. Diamond wrote, "The first personality was the ordinary, mundane, dependent, as yet undeveloped and immature boy, with his banal, bourgeois, conventional, rational outer reality and intense inferiority feelings. But the second personality was precisely the polar opposite, mature, powerful, wise, superior, autonomous, instinctual, spiritual, mystical, and deeply rooted and embedded in nature and the irrational." In hindsight, the grown Jung seems to have recognized that the second personality was clearly compensatory to the first, what we today refer to as a grandiose self designed to offset painful feelings of inferiority, anxiety and insecurity. Jung, however, felt strongly that this phenomenon is not intrinsically pathological, but rather, archetypal, indeed something played out in every individual. Personality number 1 was Jung's extroverted false self, while personality number 2 was his submerged true self. Humanity, according to Jung, neglects the inner world to its profound cost. This leads to severe internal conflicts within humans, which is then projected onto the outside world. Jung thought life is a mystery to most people. They understand disturbingly little about life. Jung also believed there was a distinct conflict between the urban and rural mind. This is seen vividly in today's USA, where Republicans are rural and Democrats are urban. Jung was often considered a mystic. He believed that a pattern of God exists inside every person. His central idea was that humanity needs to become more conscious, to integrate more and more of the God image. Jung believed that the foundations of personality are archaic, innate, unconscious, and universal. To make ourselves more conscious, we need to bring all of this to light, and integrate it into consciousness. Archetypes can be considered universal images or thought forms inherited from past generations which have a marked influence on people today, which predispose people to perceive and respond to the world in particular ways. Jung was intent on optimizing the personality. He wrote, "The achievement of personality means nothing less than the optimum development of the whole human being, a whole lifetime in all its biological, social, and spiritual aspects, is needed. Personality is the supreme realization of the innate idiosyncrasy of a living being. It is an act of high courage flung in the face of life, the absolute affirmation of all that constitutes the individual, the most successful adaptation to the universal conditions of existence coupled with the greatest possible freedom for self-determination." For Jung, the ego operates on the conscious level, the complexes operate on the personal unconscious level, and the archetypes operate on the collective unconscious level. Over time, the conscious and unconscious should synthesize within the person through the coming together of the ego, the center of the conscious psyche, and the self, the center of the whole psyche. Jung believed that consciousness has a tendency to be stubbornly blinkered and one-sided. The pluralistic unconscious mind compensates for this. We are all one and many. This is built into our psyche. The conscious is one, the unconscious is many. The reason why consciousness is unitary rather than plural is that it is centered on I, on a continuous self-narrative with I as the perpetual star of the show. The unconscious is plural, because it is based on a whole cast of complexes and archetypes and cannot focus on any one controlling identity. If it could, this would be a direct competitor for the ego, and cause chaos. The I is a gatekeeper. It determines what perceptions, thoughts, feelings and memories are allowed into consciousness, and it blocks everything else. All sorts of things flash into your consciousness, but you shut down nearly all of them. Only a few of them are allowed to enter consciousness in any serious way and be given serious consideration. The eye screens out anything that doesn't satisfy its narrative, and these excluded contents then become complexes in the unconscious. The eye seeks to maintain coherence and give the person a sense of continuity and identity. Its main means of doing so is by lying, projecting, repressing, and so on, all within a grand, pompous, pretentious narrative. It constantly uses defense mechanisms. Wikipedia says, Anna Freud enumerated the 10 defense mechanisms that appear in the works of her father, Sigmund Freud: repression, regression, reaction formation, isolation, undoing, projection, introjection, turning against one's own person, reversal into the opposite, and sublimation or displacement. Sigmund Freud posited that defense mechanisms work by distorting ID impulses into acceptable forms, or by unconscious or conscious blockage of these impulses. Let's go through these defense mechanisms one by one, since they are all interesting in their own right. Repression: some things are unacceptable to the conscious mind. They arouse anxiety. The very act of recalling them is traumatic. So they are prevented from entering consciousness. Reversion: consciousness reverts to an earlier stage of development, where things were simpler and better, rather than dealing with serious issues in the present. The person often adopts childish mannerisms, since everything was better and simpler when the person was a child. Reaction formation: consciousness defends against anxiety-producing phenomena by exaggerating the directly opposing tendency. Christian preachers who are in denial about being gay are often the keenest to highlight the Bible's prohibitions against homosexuality. Gay thoughts produce anxiety in these preachers, burdened with their terrible secret, so they preach against homosexuality, and that makes them feel better and reduces their anxiety, at least consciously. In their unconscious, they are creating a more and more powerful complex that will eventually destroy them, as we so often see. Isolation: try to create a gap between unpleasant things, and other thoughts and feelings. Put boundaries round the nasty things. Isolate them. The more isolated a problem is, the less likely you are to pay any attention to it, and the less likely it is to affect your self-esteem, at least consciously. Unconsciously, the more you try to isolate something and render it invisible, the more powerful it becomes and the more visible in your psyche, until you can see practically nothing else. Undoing: you seek to undo something, to cancel it or remove it, by engaging in the contrary behavior. Projection: the ego defends itself against problematic impulses or qualities, both positive and negative, by denying their existence in itself and attributing them to others. Introjection: the subject replicates behaviors of other subjects. If you pick up traits from your friends, you are introjecting. This can be seen as a type of reverse projection. You try to absorb into yourself positive qualities that you see in others. When you do this too much, you are other-directed and in danger of losing yourself. Turning against one's own person: this is typically associated with self-harm. You release pressure by cutting yourself, thereby letting out the pain, the distress, the trauma. Reversal into the opposite: this is the transformation of a stimulus into its opposite. Freud believed that dreams, in order to censor unpleasant things, transformed the unpleasant things into their opposites. Sublimation: transforms socially unacceptable impulses into socially acceptable actions or behaviors. Sport is a sublimation of war. Displacement: the mind substitutes a new aim or a new object for goals felt in their original form to be dangerous or unacceptable. The eye is a consummate, seamless liar and self-mythologizer. It makes up anything to suit its own agenda. At all costs, it avoids facing up to the defense mechanisms it is always deploying to keep reality and the truth at bay. It is everywhere haunted by unconscious complexes, which it relentlessly and scrupulously ignores. You can't have an honest discussion with humans. They are fundamentally dishonest. Humanity may be the most mendacious species in the universe. Nietzsche said, in some remote corner of the universe, poured out and glittering in innumerable solar systems, there once was a star on which clever animals invented knowledge. That was the highest and most mendacious minute of world history, yet only a minute. After nature had drawn a few breaths, the star grew cold, and the clever animals had to die. Humanity invented the lie. Animals don't lie? Only conscious people with theory of mind can lie. You need to be conscious of the fact that people have their own minds and own thoughts and own knowledge before you can lie. The lie depends on a liar's awareness that they know something that the victim of their lie does not know. The liar also exploits the fact that most people have a truth bias, i.e., they assume that others are telling them the truth. Have you pondered the unconscious memory? Everything you experience is retained. If your consciousness doesn't remember it, your unconscious certainly does. Each experience, of any significance, gets added to one complex or another. Plenty of experiences are deliberately repressed, suppressed and forgotten by consciousness, but not by the personal unconscious. A group of associated feelings, thoughts, and memories that have strong emotional content and resonance is a complex, which is really a living, autonomous being, seeking to resolve, to diffuse, its inattention. When a complex seizes control of your conscious behavior, you become preoccupied with whatever is on the complex's mind, and then it's the only thing on your mind. Complexes can be mild or intense. The latter obviously have the most impact on us. Complexes aren't necessarily bad. They may spur us on to outstanding achievements. They can make life much more colorful, vivid, exciting, dramatic and profound.